happened during or prior to the conduct of the survey, where the Easter Sunday press conference, Lacson's resignation from Partido Reforma, and the junking of the final petition against Marcos's presidential bid. Pulse Asia conducted the survey through face-to-face interviews with 2,400 Filipino adults with a 2% error margin. And the Marcos campaign thanking supporters following the release of the latest Pulse Asia survey. Marcos spokesperson survey.
Hindi ko gano'n tinitingnan yung survey. Tinitingnan ko lang kung ano yung magagawa ko sa tao. Malalaman naman natin yung tunay na survey sa May 9. Makita nyo naman mula sa start hanggang dulo, wala akong false move. Kahit itong 4 na senador namin, walang false move. Kahit binabato kami, never kami sumagot, never kami nanira.
For VP candidate Tito Soto, pre-election surveys and large crowds at campaign rallies do not guarantee victory. He cited the case of his nephew, Pasig City Mayor Vico Soto, who beat then-incumbent Robert Eusebio in 2019 despite lagging in local surveys. First, it was self-confessed drug dealer Kerwin Espinosa, now a former Bureau of Corrections chief, who alleged that he brought 5 million pesos of drug money to Senator Laila de Lima's house in 2012. Taking back his word, Rafael Rago says he was just coerced to testify against the senator. With this, the senator wants the Justice Department to immediately drop the drug charges against her. Our George Quiles tells us more.
The testimony is now relevant to the drug case of Senator Laila de Lima, and the star witness against her, former Corrections Bureau Chief Rafael Ragos, does an about-face, saying he was coerced by then-Justice Secretary Vitaliano Aguirre and other department officials to link the staunch critic of President Rodrigo Duterte to the illegal drug trade in the New Bilibid prison. Ragos said in an affidavit that he lied in his testimony in congressional hearings, media interviews, and even before the court. Ragos earlier said he and former NBI agent Jovencio Ablen delivered 5 million pesos in cold cash to De Lima's house twice in 2012. The senator's former bodyguard and supposed partner Ronnie Dayan allegedly received the money sent by drug lords inside the Bilibid. Ragos said he was threatened with detention if he did not cooperate. De Lima's lawyer says this new twist reveals what he calls grand conspiracy to try to silence the senator.
We knew that they were all fabrications right from the very start, and Senator Laila de Lima is innocent. The sad part is so many officials, lawyers from the Department of Justice, officials from the highest echelons of our society, of our government, and even the public attorney's office took part in the falsification.
The senator's camp is calling on the Justice Department to immediately withdraw all drug cases, work for her immediate release, and conduct an intensive investigation on officials who may have conspired against De Lima. The lawyer has been detained at the PNP Custodial Center in Camp Crame, Quezon City since 2017.
It is not just Senator Laila de Lima who's the victim of this greatest frame-up in Philippine history, but the Filipino people, the justice system. It's a direct attack towards our justice system and toward the integrity of our court system, which is why we're prepared to actually hold those people into who are the authors of this greatest deception into account.
Justice Secretary Menardo Guevara says he will speak with prosecutors in the case since he was not yet in the agency when charges against the senator were filed. CNN Philippines is trying to get the side of Aguirre, who is now vice chairman of the National Police Commission. George Cahiles, CNN Philippines.
But the Justice Department said Ragos' recantation will not impact the remaining drug cases of Senator Laila de Lima. The department said the former Bucor chief testified in just one out of the two pending cases in the local court in Muntinlupa. It also casts doubt on Ragos' motive for taking back what he said against the senator. Prosecution maintains they have strong evidence against de Lima and her former driver, Ronnie Dayan. Well, Senator de Lima welcoming Ragos' recantation in a series of tweets. The detained lawmaker says it is 5 years too late, but still appreciated. She hopes all others involved in what she says are trumped-up charges against her would soon feel guilty. She adds, quote, "It appears, after all, that justice will still be served, no matter how late," unquote. Presidential hopeful Vice President Leni Robredo and running mate Senator Kiko Pangilinan reiterating their call for de Lima's immediate release, with Pangilinan saying they want de Lima to join the team's meeting de avance. De Lima is seeking re-election under the Robredo-Pangilinan slate. Other groups and allies also calling to free de Lima now. Malacanang, meanwhile, downplays the remarks of de Lima's counsel as pure hogwash. Acting presidential spokesperson Martin Andanar says de Lima's case has nothing to do with her political views on President Duterte's anti-drug campaign or her affiliation with the opposition. Andanar urges the public to let the court decide on her cases. Coming up, what do Ateneo's Tab Baldwin and UP's Goldwyn Monteverde have to say after the Fighting Maroons put an end to the Blue Eagles' 39-game winning streak? Find out here on Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
RPN DXKP Pagadian, ang inyong Radyo Ronda. RPN Radio Philippines Network. Radio Philippines Network. Live to the world, pinaagi sa FB page, karon mag-download na. Pinaagi sa Google Play og Apple Store, YouTube og Twitter. Alang sa mas ipakuskan nga mga balita, komentaryo, kasayuran og kalingawan. Ang mas ipakuskan nga inyong Radyo Ronda. Member, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
Welcome back. 15 persons, including foreign travelers and crew from a Tubataha dive boat, are now in isolation after testing positive for COVID-19. The health department says only 2 initially had mild symptoms. The group went to Puerto Princesa City in Palawan and the Tubataha Reef. Their samples will be sent to the Philippine Genome Center for sequencing to determine which variant caused their infection. The Tourism Department also coordinating with its regional counterpart and the local government.
It's an isolated case, no? So hindi po rin natin alam kung anong klaseng variant pa ang makikita natin sa kanila dahil isi-sequence pa lang, no? Hindi pa po napoproseso ang kanilang samples. They were all immediately isolated. Hindi na po sila gumawa ng any activity dun sa pinuntahan nilang lugar. Sila po ay nag-submit na dun sa management ng local government kung saan nasa isolation facility po sila, currently being managed by the local government unit. We will tag this as urgent, no? Meron naman po tayong small number na pwede natin matest, no? Yung small machine natin para immediately we can get the results. But as of this time, wala pa pong nasasubmit sa Philippine Genome Center.
The DOH says there is still no sign of onward transmission of the Omicron BA.2.12 subvariant. None of the close contacts of the female traveler from Finland showed COVID-19 symptoms, while among those tested, no one was found positive for the virus. Just 7 days to go before the Filipino votes, Manila Mayor Isko Moreno skips his sortie and motorcade in Quezon City today. Campaign staffers say it is because of an important meeting. Moreno met with Muslims in Manila to celebrate Eid al-Fitr earlier in the day. Former Senator Bongbong Marcos slammed his fiercest rival, Vice President Leni Robredo, during a final campaign rally in the province of Isabela on Sunday. Marcos went off script from his usual speeches and said Robredo did not cooperate with President Rodrigo Duterte.
Nangyari kay Pangulong Duterte na siya at kanyang bise ay hindi nagkakasundo. Maraming hindi magawa. Kaya't napakahalaga na ang Vice President at saka ang Pangulo ay nagkakaintindihan, nagkakasundo para nagkakaisa.
Marcos also looked back on his loss to Robredo in the 2016 VP race and insisted he was cheated, even if the Supreme Court junked his protest against her last year.
Nangyayari kapag alam naman natin ang nangyari nung last time, nakatulog lang tayo kung ano na nagbago. Magpapahanap kami ng ng tune-tuneladang kape. Papadala namin dito mga 3-in-1 para walang tulugan sa Mayo 9.
Robredo's daughter Trisha joins house-to-house campaigns in the city of Tacloban, whose mayor is Marcos's cousin, Alfred Romualdez. Trisha also campaigned for her mother at the Tacloban City Market. Trisha admitted to feeling anxious about visiting Marcos's bailiwick, but said she felt inspired after meeting volunteers there. Now, on to other election updates. The Commission on Elections is open to holding special polls beyond May 9 for the 2,000 overseas voters in the Chinese city of Shanghai. Voting has not began there because of strict COVID-19 lockdowns. COMELEC entrusting the final version of the codes that will run the transmission of votes from vote counting machines to the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, and the COMELEC and the Kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas are holding the forum for presidential and vice presidential candidates this week. Catch the forum live on CNN Philippines and KBP member stations beginning tomorrow. A number of issues continue to plague farmers and fisherfolk, from wages to importation laws. Rex Remedios spoke to some of our kababayans in the agricultural sector to find out their hopes for the next government.
We chance upon Nestor Solamo carrying a sack of tresh palay in Haro, Leyte. They spread the grains beside the highway until they dry. Rice traders will then pick them up for milling before selling them in public markets. Nestor is glad the planting season is over when the irrigation system got damaged. He's hoping it will be fixed before July, when they must start planting rice again.
Mga 2 buwan yata yung Siyempre ngayon, mag-eleksyon, di pa maasikaso.
Since the harvest season is over, he will look for a side job to support 5 of his 7 children who are still studying.
Wala na nga niyan wala. Tambay na naman.
Nestor also hopes an end to cheap rice imports flooding the markets, which affects the price of their harvest. He blames the rice tariffication law, which he wants reviewed by the next administration.
Kuwan, sabi marami daw imported. Kaya ang kuwan namin dito, inaani, murang bilhin nila.
Previously, they can sell at 16 pesos per kilo. Now, traders are buying their harvest at 13 pesos a kilo. Nestor says they have no choice. It's more expensive if they will do the milling and sell them to markets.
Mura, mababang kuwan. Dami na umaangal Tapos ang bigas mahal.
A kilo of rice now sells at 38 to 50 pesos. He can only wish the country's next leaders will finally stop those who are taking advantage of them. Before sunset, Felix Maravilla Jr. is still trying to catch fish near the coast of Tagawayan, Quezon. Felix says he needs to work harder as high fuel prices eat up a chunk of his income. In the past, he can bring home 1,000 pesos for his wife and 9 children every day. Now, they get by with 400 to 700 pesos.
Hindi ka rin makalay dahil mahal ng gasolina, iwasan mo rin magkastos ng malaki. Dito ka lang sa malapit.
Aside from fuel, he also must pay 360 pesos a week for his 15,000 peso bank loan. He says it's harder to pay when they cannot sail due to bad weather.
Siyempre, malay pag minsan wala ka rin panghulog sa binilihan mo lang, ba't hindi ka man pwedeng hindi maghuhulog yan?
He also says he is lucky if his fishing net would last for 5 months. After that, he needs to take a loan again for a new net.
Buti nung araw at sobra ang isda, kulang sa tao. Ay ngayon sobra ng tao.
For now, Nestor and Felix are hoping government can help lower the prices of basic goods at the very least to help them get by. Rex Renitio, CNN Philippines.
Commuters had to wait hours for a ride at a major terminal in Parañaque City on Saturday after a number of buses were supposedly used for campaign sorties. The Parañaque Integrated Terminal Exchange, or PITX, says it called for backup units, but these were booked as well. Leni Robredo held a grand rally in Batangas, while Isko Moreno and Sara Duterte took on Pangasinan on that same day. The terminal management says it will coordinate with the Transportation Department to provide reserve units for contingencies.
What we try to do is we try to augment this by calling other bus companies that were available. Unfortunately, konti rin lang talaga naging available kasi napakadami talaga ng mga bus na nagamit dito sa mga campaign sorties.
CNN Philippines is reaching out to the LTFRB and the Provincial Buses Group for comment. The Land Transportation Office said public utility vehicles should have a special permit for campaign rallies. In other news, 8 people were killed. 3 were injured in a barangay UP campus fire in Diliman, Quezon City at around 5 in the morning. The fire was put out by 7 a.m. About 250 families were affected, with over 80 houses ravaged by the fire that reached second alarm. Authorities are still investigating the cause. Now, straight ahead, get to know the new face of Miss Universe Philippines 2022, Celeste Cortesi. And all good things come to an end. The Fighting Maroons ending the Blue Eagles' winning run in the UAAP. We'll hear from the Ateneo's Tab Baldwin and UP's Goldwyn Monteverde here on Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
RPN DXKP Pagadian. Ang inyong Radyo Ronda. RPN. RPN. Radio Philippines Network. Radio Philippines Network. Live to the world. Pinaagi sa FB page. Karon, mag-download na. Pinaagi sa Google Play o Apple Store, YouTube o Twitter. Alang sa mas ipakuskan ng mga balita, komentaryo, kasayuran o kalingawan. Ang mas Gipakusgan nga inyong Radyo Ronda.
Member, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
Welcome back to CNN Philippines. Filipino Muslims gathered today to mark Eid al-Fitr, or the festival of breaking the fast, the first held amid more relaxed COVID-19 restrictions. Paige Javier gives us a look at the festivities in Manila, where thousands joined in prayer.
Before dawn, the Muslim faithful filled the Manila Golden Mosque and its vicinity to celebrate the end of the holy month of Ramadan. At the Bonifacio Shrine, our Muslim brothers and sisters also gathered for the morning prayer. This is what Eid al-Fitr, or the breaking of the fast, looked like this year, no longer bound by tight COVID-19 restrictions.
Tulad po ng yung Eid al-Fitr natin at Eid al-Adha natin before, ay malayo po ang diferensya. Kumpara sa ngayon ay medyo maluwag po, kaya mas marami po ang umatin pumunta ng dito sa Manila Golden Mosque kaysa dati po.
The Muslim faithful is grateful they can gather and pray with friends and family just like old times. Each of them offering prayers before eating together.
Sana po magkaroon tayo ng very clean, malinis na eleksyon.
Sana po mawala na po yung pandemya.
Sana lahat ng bansa natin kakaisa, at saka sana wala na mangyari na dahas na katulad sa Ukraine nangyari.
This observance is special for Ramesses Laud, a former pastor, as he marks nearly 17 years of returning to the Islamic faith. He says this year's celebration is still meaningful despite not being in his home province.
Iba ang ngayon at saka yung mga nakaraan. Kahit na pandemya, nag-strive ang mga tao para lamang sambahin ang tagapaglikha.
President Rodrigo Duterte hopes Muslims are inspired to remain models not only of the faith, but of goodwill and compassion. Vice President Leni Robredo, meanwhile, says Eid al-Fitr reminds us about the importance of compassion and uplifting each other's lives. Malacanang announced Tuesday, May 3, as a holiday in observance of the Islamic tradition. Paige Javier, CNN Philippines.
In sports, the Ateneo Blue Eagles are no longer undefeated in the UAAP as the UP Fighting Maroons hand them their first loss in 4 years. UP put an end to Ateneo's 39-game winning streak yesterday at the Mall of Asia Arena, 84-83. UP head coach Goldwyn Monteverde spoke about his team's recovery after blowing an early 18-point lead, while Ateneo's Tab Baldwin admitted to some tactical mistakes which cost them the match.
Whatever yung run na nangyari kanina, may time na lumabang din sila sa amin. Hindi kami sumuko as a team, doing our best defensively and offensively to execute sa opensa for one, and yung team defense namin mapaganda pa namin, which I think would be a big factor sa pagpasok namin ng Final Four.
You know, I made decisions and they didn't pan out very well early in the game, and you know, that's the way it is. Now it's just a case of regrouping and bouncing back, getting ready for a tough FEU team.
Even with the loss, Ateneo enters the Final Four as the top seed with a twice-to-beat edge against FEU. The UP Fighting Maroons hold the same advantage versus LaSalle. Final Four action begins this Wednesday at the MOA Arena. Another triumph over the weekend, Pasay Celeste Cortesi is the new Miss Universe Philippines. Celeste, a crowd favorite and front-runner, beat 31 other candidates during Saturday night's coronation at the MOA Arena. The Filipino-Italian beauty queen says she hopes her victory will inspire others to keep reaching for their dreams. Celeste paid tribute to someone special after her win, posting photographs of herself and her mother wearing crowns. In the final Q&A portion, the 24-year-old said if she could stop time for a day, she would spend it with her family, especially her mom. And that is it for now. Join me again on news.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Pia Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
We all may experience obsessive thoughts, but for some, these thoughts can become all-encompassing and can lead to compulsive behavior. Obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD, is a condition that can impact a person's day-to-day life. For example, someone with OCD can be so afraid of getting contaminated by germs that it leads them to excessively washing their hands over and over again. This condition can be managed, though, with proper help, and those with it can go on to live a normal and productive life. On the program today, we'll talk more about the symptoms of OCD, its risk factors, diagnosis, and how best to manage it. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome to MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. Obsessive-compulsive disorder is a health condition that affects adults and children all over the world. Now, our guests are here today to tell us more about this and how people with OCD can best cope with the disorder. With us is Dr. Joan May Perez Rifarial. She's a psychiatrist from the Veterans Memorial Medical Center. Also with us is Ms. Jessica Espanto, who is a clinical psychologist from In Touch Community Services. OCD, obsessive-compulsive disorder. Many of us associate OCD with the desire to be neat as well as tidy, napakalinis at napaka-organized. But the condition is so much more than that. Dr. Joan, could you tell us more about OCD? What exactly is it?
OCD, as mentioned earlier in your introduction, it's a mental health concern, which is quite common. In fact, for a population, the rates can go as high as 2% of the population who may be suffering from this mental health problem. When we say OCD, it is a disorder already. So it's different from what you mentioned, like the ordinary concern about cleanliness and being tidy. When we say disorder, there is that factor already that it may have an impact on one's functionality already. It can affect one's relationships. It can already affect one's performance at work, in school, because of the time spent in doing all of these behaviors, compulsive behaviors, or engaging in these obsessive thoughts.
Now let's go back a little bit on how OCD can impact someone's day-to-day life, because these compulsions, these obsessions really, at some point, like what you said, nagiging disorder na siya. Now, Ms. Jessica, can you give us some examples on how OCD can impact one's day-to-day?
So, for example, individuals with OCD might engage in reassurance-seeking behavior, and there's a pull from their partner to give reassurance all the time. And this can put a strain in the relationship of the couple. For example, an individual with OCD might keep on asking if their hands are clean or clean enough, or if they have that obsession on contamination. Another example would be they might keep on asking, or they might keep on checking doors. It can have a pull in their partner to keep on responding to their behaviors, keep on telling them that they're safe, keep on telling them that their hands are clean or their bodies are clean, no? And that can put a strain in the relationship.
Now, there are ways that those living with OCD can overcome these obsessions and these compulsions, but we'll talk more about those later on the show. For now, though, let's discuss some factors that can make someone more likely to develop this condition. Dr. Joan, when we talk about risk factors or what may be present to make one prone to OCD, could you talk more about this?
Yes, in terms of risk factors, we always look at it from a perspective of biopsychosocial elements affecting or putting a person at risk for the development of OCD symptoms. So biologically, there are studies which have shown that there are parts of the brain which can be overactive for those who are going through symptoms of obsessive compulsive disorder. So there is hyperactivity in some parts of the brain. So even if they don't want it, some parts of the brain fire up involuntarily. So that is one. Studies have also shown some problems in terms of neurotransmitters, the secretion of neurotransmitters in the brain, specifically serotonin. That is the neurotransmitter, or in layman, it's the hormone in the brain which is unstable for patients with OCD. And so those are the targets for treatment biologically.
For those parents watching, are there any telltale signs you would pick out from a child? What type of specific behaviors are we talking about here?
These obsessive thoughts are unwanted by a child, by a teenager. And so sometimes these thoughts are about safety of the family. Sometimes the thoughts are about dangers, anything anxiety provoking for a child. So usually it's about safety of a family member. So they keep on asking their moms, I had this thought that someone in the family fell sick. They need that reassurance. So when a child always comes to the parents to ask for reassurance that everything would be fine, that everything is okay. So that can be one example of an obsessive thought that an individual has.
On the other hand, symptoms of OCD compulsions are behaviors that you may feel driven to perform repeatedly, as what was mentioned earlier. No? So, Ms. Jessica, what are some of these symptoms of compulsion naman?
Compulsions are repetitive behaviors or mental acts. Some examples of compulsions when an individual has an obsession on contamination would be washing, showering, and cleaning. When an individual with OCD has an obsession on harm, they might engage in checking behaviors, checking doors, windows, even stoves.
Dr. Joan, when it comes to OCD, are we talking, is it just one size fits all or meron bang mild, moderate, severe ito?
When we say OCD, there are different levels of severity to it. In fact, in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, there would be a specifier for the level of distress or the level of insight that an individual has as to the severity of his or her symptoms. So we may assess one as having full insight, good insight. They know that they are going through some irrational thoughts, irrational behaviors, they are aware of it. But for some, the insight may not be as good, so they may not admit it. They may say that, oh, there's something which I don't have control over. But for some, they really believe in their obsessive thoughts and compulsive behaviors, and we label them as having no insight at all. So there can be that variation in terms of their ability to understand what really is going on with their thoughts and behaviors.
For some, external factors might be triggering their obsessive compulsive disorder. When we return, we'll talk more about these triggers. We're your partner in healthcare. You're watching MedTalk Health Talk. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk, where caring is our calling. Obsessive compulsive disorder is different for each person, but the OCD cycle usually looks the same once it is triggered. An obsession leads to anxiety, which then leads to compulsions, and this can become disruptive in a person's everyday life. Let's talk about the most disruptive form of OCD according to the National Institute of Mental Health, which are ruminations and intrusive thoughts. Dr. Joan, could you talk more about this?
For some cases of individuals with OCD, it's always there can be that possibility that it's purely on obsessive thoughts. So there can be no compulsive behaviors associated with the thoughts. And as mentioned, these thoughts can be about aggression, thoughts about harming people. So these thoughts can lead to one feeling that anxiety, that fear that they may in fact hurt someone, they may hurt a loved one, they may hurt a family member. So for some, this can be very distressing because they do not like these thoughts, but these thoughts continue to come in, and thus the ruminative aspect of it.
Now, Dr. Joan, many might be listening to this and think, pareho lang ba ang OCD sa pagiging meticuloso?
It's different because when we say meticuloso, perfectionistic, so perfectionism can be a part of our personality. So we need to make that clear distinction between an obsessive compulsive personality type, which would include that being meticulous, perfectionistic, we want everything to be in order, versus the obsessive-compulsive disorder itself, which is, again, characterized by the presence of those very intrusive, unwanted thoughts, which are anxiety-provoking, and then we do something to at least reduce the impact, the anxiety brought about by those thoughts.
Now, external factors might be triggering someone's obsessive-compulsive disorder. Jessica, could you talk about what are some of the possible triggers?
So some of the things that maintain OCD would be stress, stress that you get from the environment, work stress, school stress, family stress. There's also pandemic-related factors. Okay, so studies suggest that the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated OCD symptoms in individuals. Another trigger would be parental factors. So what do I mean by parental factors? In some situations, parents might model excessive washing or excessive checking, or at times they can participate in the checking behavior. So with the intention of reassuring the child, they might participate in checking, for example, the door if it's locked. So unfortunately, even though the parent has well intentions, this can reinforce the compulsions and the obsession.
Now, another common trigger or a possible trigger here is previous trauma. Dr. Joan, could you talk about this? How does a previous trauma, what type of previous trauma could be a risk factor for OCD?
Any form of traumatic life experience can possibly be a risk factor for the development of OCD, specifically trauma related to losses. We know that when we lose someone, and if it's sudden and we are not prepared for it, then it can elicit symptoms of grieving, depression, anxiety. And in fact, this example studies have shown that when we lose someone, when we lose something, be it real or imagined, it can have a profound effect on the risk of having symptoms of OCD. So it would, for example, if we lose someone from a disease, then it can make someone be more at risk to be more mindful of cleanliness. There can be fear of contamination. There can be fear about safety, security of loved ones, of family. And that's why, again, as many as 80% of those individuals who had experienced stressful and traumatic situations may be at risk for the development of OCD symptoms.
Now that we know the symptoms and triggers of obsessive-compulsive disorder, if you think you have OCD, especially if you have ruminations and intrusive thoughts, it is very important that you seek professional help. But only a trained medical and psychological professional can determine whether you have this disorder. Now, Dr. Joan, walk us through how OCD is diagnosed.
First, we do a very accurate and very thorough clinical examination in the clinic. We follow the diagnostic and statistical manual of mental disorders. There is a criteria to be followed there in terms of assessing and diagnosing an individual to have OCD. So in the criteria, it says that there should be the presence of obsessions, obsessive thoughts, the ruminative thoughts are there, and or compulsive behaviors as a response or as a way to reduce the impact of the ruminative thoughts. And another criteria which is very important is that these behaviors or the time spent on ruminating on these thoughts is usually more than an hour. So it's time consuming. And because of this element of being time consuming, then it leads to that impact on the distressing impact on one's functionality. Because instead of being able to focus at work, go to work on time, attend classes on time, people with OCD may spend more hours at home to check and recheck, or maybe wash hands before they're able to go out and do the things or errands that they need to do. And we need to make sure that it's not due to another medical problem or another problem which may be triggered by a substance use or abuse.
Now, Ms. Jessica, how is OCD naman determined if this is mild, moderate, or severe?
You can evaluate it in terms of how frequent it happens and in terms of the level of interference it has on one's work, school, or home functioning.
There's no cure for OCD today, but there are ways to keep it under control. More on this when we return. Your health is our mission here on Med Talk Health Talk. We'll be right back. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez and welcome back to Med Talk Health Talk. Obsessive compulsive disorder is a serious mental health condition that affects many children as well as adults. Now, coping with it can be challenging, but the disorder doesn't have to affect a person's quality of life. Dr. Joan, let's talk about management, treatments available for those with OCD.
So first, we have a psychopharmacology, like we have medications which can help with us to put the serotonin balance back. As mentioned earlier, there are problems with the secretion of neurotransmitters in the brain. So that's one. We address the levels of serotonin in the brain through medications. Another is behavioral therapy. So we have different therapies, and usually we combine pharmacologic and behavioral therapies. Studies have shown that this would be the perfect combination to achieve better control of the anxiety, better control of the situation, and it gives us the best results in the treatment and recovery of patients with OCD.
Now, Ms. Jessica, could you talk to us about the behavioral side? Let's talk about cognitive behavioral therapy. How does this work?
So there are two main camps, the CBT camp, cognitive behavioral therapy, and also mindfulness and acceptance commitment therapy. Okay, both of these interventions change how one thinks and behaves. For the CBT camp, a person's thinking is changed through cost-benefit analysis or determining if a belief is true or not true. Okay, for the mindfulness and ACT camp, the focus is actually not the content of the thought, but the process. Okay, so they view the individual with OCD as someone experiencing difficulty. Okay, and this is manifested by the obsessions and compulsions.
Now, Dr. Joan, when it comes to people like those, is OCD something that can be managed by oneself? If they learn certain coping mechanisms, is OCD something that people who find that they have some of the symptoms, should they try to manage it themselves?
For some, they have the symptoms persistently, and for some, I've had patients under my care who had these symptoms on an episodic basis because they've learned some coping strategies and techniques on how to handle the symptoms on their own. But of course, we always emphasize that family support is also very important because no one should go through this alone. When an individual admits or is aware that these are really very unwanted, irrational, illogical thoughts and behaviors, then family support also is very important. We need to be allies with the family because because they are the ones who are with the individuals 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it's important for family members to be empathic, to understand that this is something that is really beyond the control of someone. It's when we feel anxiety symptoms, there is a feeling that we've lost control over the situation. So the family member should be there to reassure, to encourage, and to always just support and to empathize and not be judgmental.
Now, while obsessive-compulsive disorder can be overwhelming at times, help is available for those dealing with the condition. So stay focused on your goals, have a good support system, and find a healthy outlet. Now, these are just some tips that can help you live a healthy and happy life. Thank you very much, psychiatrist Dr. Joan Perez Refarial and psychologist Ms. Jessica Espanto, for being with us today. We appreciate your time and your insights. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and we'll see you again next time.